Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Interviewing Wednesdays. It's December 2nd. We're very, very glad you're with us today. For those people on Zoom, if you have questions throughout the presentation, we ask that you just enter your questions into the chat box. And for those people on Facebook, please just enter your questions into the comment field. I am monitoring that feed and I'll make sure we get those questions answered for you. For those on Zoom, we really like if you'd use the speaker view, which is in the lower left-hand corner. That way you see the speaker and the slide deck that's being presented. Where that red arrow is, you can grab those little white lines and you can slide that back and forth if you're on a PC or Mac, and you can make the speaker bigger or smaller, just depending on whatever works for you and on your computer. Please note this event is being recorded and is currently live on Facebook. The recording will be on the Career at FW Facebook page and on the Career USA YouTube channel for others to view in the future. By participating in this event, and if you post a comment in the chat box or you have your microphone or camera on, you give consent for your comment, name, and picture to appear. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeff Morris. I founded Career at FW back in 2008 to help the unemployed in the DFW area. In 2012, I started CareerUSA.org to help people outside the DFW area. I've written a book called What I've Learned About Your Job Search That You May Not Know. It's on Amazon for 15 bucks, but if you want to drive by the house and throw 10 bucks out the window, I'll throw a book in your window. I'll try to throw a book back in your window. Since 2007, I've been facilitating and leading the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group, and I'll tell you about our upcoming program at the end of this session. And since 2017, I've been a member of the practice interview team. Well, we like to, before we get to our speaker, there's just a couple of things that people can do on interviewing. And so, Mark, would you like to tell us about the pit crew?
Yes, please. Thank you, Jeff, and welcome everybody. And I'd like to know, maybe you guys can put it in the chat session, who's the first timer here with the pit crew. And so let me tell you a little bit about the pit crew. Is send me an email at dallaspitcrew@gmail.com and I'll send you what I'm just about to say. So you don't have to take any notes. And if you're interested in learning how it works, just send me that email. I do want to speak a little bit to motivation right now. There it is. Jeff just highlighted it. Oh, and also I encourage you to link in with me. If you search Mark A, initial A, McDonald, just send me a brief note that said we met, here at the Pit Crew webinar or the Wednesday afternoon interview webinar. And I'll link you in with my network. And, that'll give you a bigger network on LinkedIn to help with your target company research and things like that. So I'm kind of working on revamping my introduction to the pit crew, and part of that means that I won't tell you a lot about how the pit crew works. You'll hear that in the interview, but I will say we give you a very customized and personalized interview experience, and that's based on a job description that you provide. So when you are ready to practice, you need to send a job description and your resume into the pit crew. We do interviews any day of the week. It takes a couple of days to set them up. So I have to coordinate your availability with the availability of 3 panelists, 3 hiring managers, and they truly have been hiring managers as part of their professional responsibility. So those are the ones that do the interview and give you the feedback. And it's a very good experience, builds your confidence, and you will make some mistakes. Some people are concerned, that they'll look foolish, but no. You may make some mistakes and we'll tell you how to correct them, and it'll be a good learning experience for you, which means you can practice as many times as you like. And so I got a couple of examples here. A few weeks ago, I was contacted, these things seem to come in bursts, but I was contacted by several people who had been laid off after a long tenure at their previous role, more than 15 years, okay? And I got contacted by one this week as well. And so that's a very common thing. People realize that they haven't interviewed in a long time and they need to practice, and so they sign up. What happened also this week was I got contacted by 2 people, similar, well, not exactly similar. They had many years of experience, 15 plus. They've been able to get traction. So they've had some interviews. They just haven't got the offer. So they're not able to close the deal through their interview experience. And so the pit crew can help you with that as well. So that's the breadth and depth of what we can do. It's all based on that job description, and our hiring managers in your situation, we will personalize it, and you can come back and practice as often as you like, and it costs absolutely nothing. So there you go. It's free. It's all based on volunteer people. And so that might mention this. I've heard from a couple of my panelists that they may be landing soon. And so that's a pretty common occurrence. So I'm always looking for new volunteers. It doesn't matter what industry you've been in, you just need to have been a hiring manager as part of your professional responsibility, or if you were in HR, you were in talent acquisition. And so that's the only requirement to take this opportunity to give back. And almost all the panelists are in job transition, just like you are. So they're walking in your shoes. And if that's you and you feel you have a heart for helping, then I've got a good opportunity for you. You don't have to do it every week. You do it when you can. And like I said, it doesn't matter what industry. And then finally, I like to mention on the Wednesday meeting that I do one other thing. I coach on how to answer the question, why did you leave your last position? Okay, and it may not be your last position. It might have been one, before that or one before that. Or you may have a series of short-term engagements and you just don't know how to explain that. So that's an important question. You're likely to be asked that at some point in your cycle. And so you need to answer it with confidence and brevity. And we'll talk about how to do that. We'll storyboard your situation, how to answer that initial question and any follow-up questions that may be generated based on your situation. So reach out to me at dallaspitcrew@gmail.com and we'll set up a time for a confidential discussion, or we can do it on Zoom and record it so you can look at it afterwards. So that's my story and I'm sticking to it. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. All right, Walt, Interview Success Workshop.
Good afternoon, everyone. Walt here. So let me ask you a couple of questions. Are you really prepared for a job interview? How much time have you spent on your resume compared to the amount of time you spent on getting ready for the interview? I mean, your resume kind of gets you in the door, but it's that interview is going to either find out whether this is a good fit or not. So do you really know what you need to do to get prepared? What does selling ourselves really mean? And what are you going to do for a greeting? What's your opening statement? How are you going to close that interview? What type of questions do you think they might ask? And how would you look at options, structures, strategies of how you might approach a response, depending on who you're talking to, what the question is, and where you are in the process? Do you know how to establish a connection, build a rapport with the interviewer? Do you know how to demonstrate your expertise and your value to that particular job department or company? Well, all this and more is at the free Interview Success Workshop. Look me up on LinkedIn. It gives you all the details.
Oop, and I think Walt is frozen.
I think so.
Yeah, Walt is frozen. Okay, well, just look Walt up, Walt_Glass@yahoo.com. He does workshops on Tuesday, and he'll let you know his next availability. He called me this morning saying his internet was going in and out, so he wasn't sure if he'd even be with us. So he was with us halfway, and he's now frozen. Okay, we'll move on. Well, today, during the month of November and December, we've had special guest speakers come and talk to you. We did our 13-part series that Mark and Walt put together. We'll be starting that back up again in January. So we've been bringing in different speakers over the last several weeks and for the next couple of weeks. So this week, Gayle Bridgeman is with us. She's going to talk about interviewing. I've known Gayle since, I think she said 2008, when we first met at Career Connections way back yonder. We were both unemployed, looking for what we were going to be doing next. She currently works for Lee Heck Harrison and does interview coaching and does just career coaching with candidates and helping candidates. And she also, you may know her from the Frisco Career Transition Workshop for many years. She has done the interviewing module at the workshop. And so Gayle, thank you for being with us, and it's all yours.
You're welcome. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. So let me see if I can get my slide up here. Can you see my slide, Jeff?
You are good to go.
We're good to go. All right, very good. Well, my plan, I don't have anything that's fun and visual on this slide deck. Usually we do this in person, when we're working with several hundred people that join us at a big forum. But I have incorporated some new things today too that I want to share with you. I would like you to hold questions until the end. And then Jeff will be able to read what those questions are from his side on both Zoom and Facebook. And then I will be glad to answer as many as I can. I would also like to welcome, if Mark or Walt would like to jump in with any answers too, I would certainly welcome any feedback there. Any support from these guys. I just really admire the work that they do as well. So, okay, so as we get started, one thing I do the interviewing as a topic. That's one of the worst things I hate thinking about doing myself is interviewing. It's just, I'm like, oh, I panic when I start thinking about having to do an interview for myself. But I love coaching my clients to tell them what they need to do. I also am a branding specialist, and what that means is I help people how they brand themselves on digital media as well as in person. That's an important piece as well. And then also LinkedIn is my specialty, where I help people build their business profiles to communicate what they do and how they want people to perceive them too. So I do a lot of different things. The last couple of years, I've worked almost exclusively with career development with companies who are helping their associates learn how to develop for their jobs and grow in their roles. I used to do a lot of career transition work with LHH as well. So helping people that have been laid off. And that was how I met Jeff Morris and Foster Williams back in 2008. So been quite a journey. It still is a journey. So I'll go ahead and move on over to I guess, are you still seeing my slide here, Jeff?
Yep, I see your slide. You're good.
Okay, I guess I'm looking at where I click. I found the right place to click to move my slides ahead. I thought I could do it on my keyboard, but it's on the screen. Okay, there we go. All right. So I'm going to talk today about acing that interview. As Jeff just mentioned, his daughter just aced an interview, multiple interviews, and has a new job out in San Francisco. And that is just awesome. We love to celebrate those things. Again, forgive me for my voice today because my allergies came back full force a couple days ago, and I'm a couple of octaves lower than normal, but I hope you'll be able to understand the tips I'm sharing. These are going to be tips today of what to do and not to do in the interview process. So, and just a lot of tips to help you remember to focus. And, Mark and Walt have both mentioned some things about what you need to do to prepare. It's very important that you give plenty of time and consideration to the interview as well as your resume. So today's focus, I'm going to talk about interviewing in general, and hopefully someday we'll be back to interviewing in person like we used to. Also, I have a segment I've added. This is some new information about interviewing in the virtual world. Not everybody's comfortable being on camera and talking to people without people being in front of them. I feel like I'm looking out my window and seeing the trees and stuff in my front yard and the bird fountain in front of my office and in my window. And I'm like, oh gosh, where are all the people? But I know you're there. And then we'll answer questions at the very end. So as we get started here, interviewing in general, I break this up into several different buckets. I like doing things this way. We have 3 different buckets here. We have how you prepare for the interview, and then the event itself, where you either go in person or you're having the conversation with the people that are interviewing you. And then the follow-up, which is after you've completed that activity. So as we get started, we're going to talk about preparing for the interview. We have 3 components here. One is your mental component, one is your physical component, and the last is your virtual component. And I'll explain each one of these a little bit more. As you think about the mental component of preparing for the interview, I put into this bucket, it's like researching the company and the position that you're going after. I can't tell you how important this piece is. I have interviewed a number of people in my career with different kinds of companies as both a hiring manager and as a director of HR. I can't tell you how many times people would say, oh, what does your company do? I'm like, oh, why don't you go on the internet and find out? Back when I first started in my career, we didn't have the internet. Can you believe that? I'm not really that old, but we didn't have, the internet's not been around that long. And we used to have to write to companies and ask them to mail like their annual, their financial book and everything, like their company's financial results. And so we would write and get information to be able to learn about a company as we wanted to interview. Now it's very simple. You can go online and you can get information about a company and the position too. So that is so important, because you don't want to go into an interview and say, oh, I don't know what you do. Okay, then maybe you're not the right person for the job. First of all, that's very important. Second of all, assess your skills. I always tell my clients to look at the position itself that they're interviewing for or planning to interview for, and then look at what the people are wanting, and then look at your own skills and say, how do you align? Because if I have 5 things I'm looking for in a person, and you show up to interview with me and you don't talk about any of those 5 things as being your skill set, then I'm wondering if you're not the right fit for the job. So that's real important too, that you say, what do I do? Maybe you've got 30 great skills, but in the job posting, there may be 5 that they're focused on. So think about that, and how do you align with what they're looking for? Because it's all about what they're looking for, not about what you want. You're trying to match yourself to what they're looking for. Then compile answers to questions. There are going to be a lot of questions you have about the company itself. They're going to be asking you a lot of questions too. It is really, really important, like both Walt and Mark said, you must do your homework up front. You must prepare, like over prepare for the things that you want to tell about your stories and your experience. Because when you go in, everything will be top of mind, and you don't have to think back to 3 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago to an experience that you need to share. And then the types of interviews. What types of interviews are there? Oh my goodness, there are so many. And it used to be that recruiters would do phone interviews first, just to assess that connection. And then you might go in person. You might have a one-on-one with the HR or the hiring manager. You might have a panel interview. There are many different types of processes you can go through. But this year, especially, it seems like a phone interview is not enough now. They start with a Zoom interview or any other platform that you might use, MS Teams, WebEx. What else is there? There are a lot of other ones out there. Zoom is the one I use the most, and that seems to be a most popular one. But there are a lot of types of interviews you have to be ready to jump in and do. So you need to prepare mentally for that as well, especially if you don't like doing interviews over a computer and a screen. You've got to really start feeling comfortable with doing that, because that's your first impression if you can't meet them in person. Okay, preparing now for the physical part. There are 3 components here. I start with attitude, and you notice my tip at the bottom says attitude is everything. It absolutely is. We've all been through unfair situations. We've felt like, oh my gosh, I didn't deserve to lose my job. I didn't ask for this to happen. But when you think about it, when you go and talk to someone, whether it's on camera or in person, and you're trying to be considered for a role, your attitude is so important, because, don't go feeling sorry for yourself. Don't go being bitter. It's like you say, hey, I'm here and I can do this. I can do this job. And you want that right attitude, because leave everything else behind. And I know I've been in those shoes before, where I've been in transition, and it gets hard. You feel like you've been beat down to the curb sometimes. But please keep that in mind. Just remember, attitude is everything. Now, your appearance is important too, though. And you think about that. If you're going in person, you need to dress the part. And when I say dress the part, think about the job that you are interviewing for. What is the role? Is it going to be an entry-level role? Is it a mid-level management role? Is it a senior level role? What is your brand, and what are you aspiring to? You want to think about how you look and how you want to dress. I used to always tell my guy clients, wear a suit and tie, wear a suit and tie. That was back in 2009 and 10, back in that era. I don't tell people to necessarily dress like that now, but you have to know the company that you're going to. A real key part on that is ask your recruiter, how should I dress? Ask that recruiter, because they can say, and they do often anymore, don't wear a suit and tie, guys, you'll be overdressed. Or telling the ladies, don't wear high heels and be all sleek and fancy that way. It's like you're going to be overdressed for our business. So you don't want to look like you're out of place the moment you walk in the door or appear on the screen. So make sure that you pay attention to your appearance. The other thing is thinking about your appearance, making sure that everything is taken care of. Sometimes, we have stray hairs. Sometimes we maybe needed to have our hair colored or cut, things like that. And so it's like, I'm not telling you you have to do those things, but look at yourself in the mirror. And I always tell people, do this a couple of days before your interview. Dress up how you're going to dress, whether it's in person or virtual. And then look at yourself and ask the question, would I hire me? That's a real important question. Would I hire me? And then if you say, I'm not sure, what is there about looking at yourself that you wouldn't hire? So think about those things. It's real important how you present yourself, just your overall appearance too. I know Locke Alderson, he also does a lot of interviewing topics, and we always laugh. It's like, okay, you've got to have that breath spray. Well, when you're meeting virtually, that's not as important, but when you're meeting in person, that can be. And if people smoke, they need to be aware of that, because you're going to smell like smoke when you go into an interview. So there are just a lot of details like that you need to pay attention to. And then last but not least is your attire. And what I want to encourage you to think about is, how do you want to look, and what colors are flattering, and how does this tie into the business itself where you want to have a role? Are you going to look like you fit the role that you're interviewing for? So that is real important too, to think about your attire. And your attire is still important when you are doing virtual interviewing as well. Okay. Now let's go to the next one. This is still part of your preparing. This is the virtual impression. This is your first impression. And it used to be, I would always tell people that your first impression before you meet in person is going to be your LinkedIn profile. What's your picture look like on LinkedIn? What are you saying about yourself? What do people see in your headline? What do they see in your summary section? So what are they reading about you? What's the impression there when they look at your profile? Well, these days, that may still be your first impression, what's on social media. But when you go to interview, if it's not in person, it's still going to be virtual. And so you really need to make sure that you're making that right first impression. That includes how you talk, how you dress. How does that align with your LinkedIn profile? Okay. So think about social media. What is your brand? How many different social media platforms are each of you on? I know that that's an issue a lot of times, where people are on a lot of platforms, and you may make different impressions depending on what those platforms are. I want to encourage you, especially in job search, make sure that you pay special attention not only to LinkedIn, but any other social platforms you are on. Make sure that you're not saying things that would keep you from getting hired. Sometimes even pictures on your Facebook or other accounts like that. You might have pictures on there that you're sharing with friends and not think anything about it, but a potential employer and recruiters could look you up. And I've actually done that before. I've worked on projects with some recruiters in the last few years where I actually looked up people on Facebook that they were supposed to interview. And there were a few that we actually declined to interview because we saw the things they were posting on Facebook between photos and comments. And we said, wait a minute, that looks like a different person, but it was the same person on LinkedIn that was applying for the job. So you want to make sure that you're not doing extra damage to your brand by things on other platforms. Sometimes I tell people, depending on where you're at, you may want to close down those profiles, or you want to really censor them. When I say censor them, make sure that you're not making public posts and you're keeping things amongst friends. And even that can be a little bit scary. So just really pay attention. LinkedIn is public, and anybody can see what you have on LinkedIn. So keep that in mind whenever you're commenting or the kinds of things you share, because that is all about forming your brand. So, okay, now we're going to move over to the event itself. And the event itself has 3 categories. Your first impression, and this is assuming in-person interviewing. The second is answering questions, and the third is asking questions. So we're going to start first with that first impression, the actual event itself. This is assuming in person. You want to arrive promptly. Don't be late. Please don't be late. And if you find you're going to be late, you need to call the person, have their phone number. That's real important that you have that mobile phone number of the person you're meeting, whether it's the HR recruiter or it's the hiring manager. Make sure you've got a number you can call in case you get caught up in a traffic jam on the freeway and can't get there. But it's real important. Be there 15 minutes ahead of time is great. You don't need to be there any sooner than that, but just try to make sure that you know how to get where you're going and be there timely. Smile. Sometimes when we go into interviews, we're very nervous, aren't we? And it's like, oh my gosh, I'm just so nervous. Don't forget that smile, because especially if smiling is a part of your brand, smile, okay? A firm handshake. Now, I realize 2020 has been the year of nixing the handshakes, but if we get back to shaking hands again, and that will happen someday, you don't want the limp fish handshake. You want to shake a person's hand firmly, but not too firmly. You don't want to break their hand either. Make eye contact. I can't tell you how many times I've met applicants and it's like they look at me and then they look away. And when we're sitting down and talking, they won't look, they won't make direct eye contact. Sometimes it may be a cultural thing, but it's like you really have to force yourself if you're not used to that. Think about looking at that person that you're talking to. Most people are not scary. So think about making that eye contact. That's real important. It makes me feel like you're connecting. And when I ask questions, it's like, if you're not looking at me, I question, do you have something to hide? So make sure that you're paying attention to that. Your body language is really important too. You don't want to sit cross-armed in a chair. You don't want to sit like where you're kind of lazing back in the chair and acting like you're in a lounge chair watching TV either. Body language is important both in person and when you're on video as well, because they can tell if you're slouching around, or they can tell if you're like, oh, God, is this ever going to end? So, just the things that you do, you can pay attention to those things and just be aware of what you're doing. Okay. Now we're going to get into answering questions. There are some real important questions, and I know Mark and Walt deal in this area specifically about the types of questions that you will be asked in the interview process. The first and foremost, most important one I always ask, and I always seem to get asked that too when I'm on the interviewing side, is tell me a little bit about yourself. That does not mean that I want to know that you have a spouse and children and grandchildren and a frog or a dog or a cat. I don't care about those things. The first question when I say, tell me about yourself, what do you do professionally? What is the position you're interviewing for here? I want you to frame your answer around why you're the right person for that job before we even get started. So you want to talk about, well, here are the things I enjoy doing. Here's some things I've really done well in my career. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, that aligns very nicely with what we're interviewing about today. Maybe this person's a good fit because they do the things that we're looking for. So it's kind of an informative, what are you? What is your brand? What do you do? There are two different kinds of questions in the series of questions. One is traditional questions, and these questions are going to be things like, have you ever managed a project? Have you ever managed a budget of over $100 million? Have you ever managed people? I mean, each one of those questions that you can be asked, it's going to be a straightforward answer. Well, yes, I have, or no, I haven't, or yes, this is what I've done. The behavioral interview questions, this is story time. And when Walt and Mark both said that you need to work on developing your preparation for the interview, this is very, very important. The behavioral questions, it's a storytelling exercise. At LHH, we use what we call the SOAR stories, SOAR. Some people call it STAR. So they're different abbreviations. But if you use any one of these, think about this. There are 4 steps to your answer to the question. Tell me about a time you missed a project deadline. Okay, that's a question that someone's asking me in a behavioral interview. So I've got my SOAR story, and I'm going to tell in 60 to 90 seconds what my answer is to that question. So the SOAR, S stands for describe your situation. Not too much, not too little. The O talks about obstacles that you might have encountered. The A talks about what were the actions you took. And then the R is the results that you achieved. And the R, the results, I always like to say, let's put a happy face by that R, because we ideally, even if it was a challenging circumstance, you want to say, but I turned things around, here were the results, and everyone was happy. So if you remember those 4 steps for building your stories in the behavioral interview process, you're going to be able to hit a home run every time. But remember, you've got to prepare, and there are behavioral questions that you might be asked. I'm sure that Mark and Walt both have a list of questions that you might be asked that you need to prepare for. They're quite extensive numbers of questions that you can prepare for. But if you look and look at those questions, and then you also go through and write your own story, how do you answer each of those questions? Sometimes those stories, I've got examples that might fit 2 or 3 different behavioral questions because it just fits. So I don't have to necessarily have a different story for everyone. Hopefully I won't use the same story in the same interview twice, but you don't want to do hypothetical. It's like, tell me about a time that you had a challenge with a manager. And I say, well, I never have had, but if I did, here's what I would do. If you do that once, that might be okay. If you answer hypothetically instead of a real world situation twice or 3 times, you're probably not the right person for the job. One of the things that I've used in behavioral interviews is I used to have a guy who was a director of operations on our team, and he was kind of a pain. And I knew that he was difficult. And I had to ask people questions as the HR director before they met with this guy, because I knew that some of these people, when they came in, I thought, oh, I don't know if they're going to be able to stand this guy and work well with him. So I would ask certain questions about, tell me about a time you've had a challenge with a manager that was very difficult. And I would see what their responses were. And some of them handled themselves very well with that. And some of those were successful because they got along with this guy and they could work well together. There were others that, by the way they answered that question, I realized they weren't going to be a good fit with this guy that they were going to report to. So oftentimes when you're asked behavioral questions, it's because they know you're going to have certain circumstances and they want to see if they think you can deal with that and be the right fit for that job. So keep those things in mind as well. Okay, now we're going again to another series in the event. This is about the salary. First you need to know what the job is and what they're expecting of you before you talk about the money. Sometimes recruiters want you to talk about how much money do you want right up front. You need to do your research. You need to have an answer. You need to know what's competitive in your field. So you can't avoid talking about salary. You can always defer that a bit by saying, well, I'd like to know more about the job role itself before we discuss salary. So do your homework. That's really, really important. Okay. Excuse my stopped up head. Asking questions. Think about this. When you ask questions in an interview, it's not just about them asking you questions, but it's also about you looking and saying, what else can I learn here? Assess the fit of the job. That is so important because I've actually personally had interviews before. I had one in particular that I met the person I would report to, and it just didn't feel like a good fit. We just couldn't connect. I thought, well, this is the first time I've met her. Maybe that's why. And so I met the rest of the team. We hit it off very well. I felt like that would be a good fit working with the team. When I came back and had another interview with the hiring manager, the one that I would be reporting to, it was like there was not a fit. It was like a big gap. And I realized after that interview, that second time around with her, I thought, I could get along great with these other people on the team. I felt like there was a solid fit, but I didn't feel that connection with her. And it was just like that feeling, just a gut feel. And so finally, what I did, and the tricky thing about this was a friend of mine, a very good friend I had worked with for years, had recommended me for this job because the hiring manager was a personal friend of hers. That was kind of like, oh, how do I get out of this gracefully, right? Because I didn't want to be offered the job and turn it down. I didn't want to take the job feeling like it wasn't a good fit. So I actually wrote to the hiring manager and I gracefully declined being a candidate for that interview because I just felt like that wasn't going to be a win-win situation. So, sometimes you have to assess and say, maybe this is good, maybe it's not good. But, trust your judgment as you're looking at this because it's real important, what you're going to be doing and who you're going to be doing it with. The other thing, one of the questions I always like to ask is, why is this role available? Where's the person that had it before? Sometimes you'll get an answer that says, oh, that person got promoted. Yay, that's good, right? Sometimes they'll say, well, that person left the company. Ooh, okay, why? And sometimes they won't divulge that. Sometimes they'll say, well, this position's been open 5 times in the last 5 years. I'm going, ooh, okay, maybe that's a one to stay away from because they're churning people. So don't be afraid to ask that question. Why is this role available? I always like the one where the person that was in it got promoted because that shows growth. It shows growth from within and so on. So, but it does show interest when you ask questions versus just sitting there like a bump on a log and just answering their questions, right? Okay, let's go on to the next one, the follow-up. After you've completed your interview, you can write thank you notes, you can make calls or send emails, and be gracious in the end. I'm going to talk about each one of these specifically. As we talk about thank you notes, I used to be really big on writing a thank you note in person, like a mail. Send it through snail mail or the postal service if you don't know what snail mail is. But it's like writing a card, just a couple of lines and a little card. Thank you so much for taking time to meet with me about the project manager role. I really enjoyed learning about the company and I look forward to hearing from you. I'm very interested in this role. You could say something like that. It doesn't have to be long and grandiose. It shows appreciation to the person you met with or people, multiple people. It helps you to stand out. Oftentimes, I've seen this myself and I've heard this from other recruiters that out of 10 people that get interviewed for a job, 1 writes a thank you note, 9 don't. That does make a big difference. So it makes you stand out. And that could be a deciding factor, the fact that you followed up. Now, if you have something that you thought of after the interview, that's an opportunity to add some additional input as well. My tip today is because so many companies are operating virtually. I mean, like if you wrote me a note and mailed it in the snail mail and sent it to the Lehigh Harrison office, I would never get it because I don't go to that office. I work from my home office or I go to different campuses and work with people there. So in today's environment, especially, I doubt that people you interview with are going to give you their home address. They're thinking, I don't want you to know where I live. Okay, why do you want my home address? Because you want to send a gift or a card or whatever. So think about that. Email is the best approach to send something to people. Okay, so make sure that you're paying attention to those follow-ups. You can do calls and emails too to follow up. My thought, my personal preference is I don't like people making calls. That seems very intrusive to me. If you've interviewed, you're certainly welcome to ask them how long they're going to take to make a decision. How many more people do they plan to interview before they make a decision on the role? You can have those kind of conversations during the closing of your interview. If you ask them, gosh, is it okay if I reach out to you a week from now and just check in? That interviewer says, sure, put it on your calendar and do it. Most people don't follow up, when given that permission to do it. I like the option of the email versus a call, just because you're sending an email to follow up and you're not intruding in their day. And it just shows that you're interested. So please keep that in mind. I think that's always a good touch to do. And then last but not least, think about a gracious conclusion. What happens if you receive an offer and accept it. That's great. You know, you're thankful, you're appreciative, you're excited about the role. What happens if you don't get that job? Let's say you went through several interviews and you ended up not being their choice. I want you to remember something here, that even if you did not get that job, write them a thank you note anyway. And that's like an email. We're talking emails now. But whoever you interviewed with, if you really like that company and you really want to be a part of that company and you really feel like there's another opportunity down the road, this is not the end of the road, write them a note and just say, thank you so much for meeting with me and considering me for this role. Please keep me in mind if you have future opportunities. If you feel that way, you may not feel that way. You may say, yeah, I didn't want to work there anyway. But by writing a note like that, I actually had a client who he had a group of target companies. There were 4 companies in Plano that he wanted to be with. Those were his top 4. He only wanted to consider one of those 4 companies. So he actually interviewed. There was a position with one of his target companies, and he interviewed. The recruiters contacted him to put him through the screening. He interviewed with the hiring managers, and he didn't get the job. So he wrote a thank you note to all the people involved, different emails for each one, thanking them for taking their time. Please keep me in mind for future opportunities. Okay. A month later, the recruiters called him again and said, oh my gosh, we have another opportunity. Are you interested? Of course he was. So he went through a different set of hiring managers this time, same recruiters. He went through that process, didn't get the job this time. Now, by the second time, you start thinking, oh, maybe this is just not going to work out for this company. But he did the same thing again. He wrote a thank you note to everyone involved, thank you email. And those recruiters, oh my gosh, they were so impressed that he didn't come back and say, well, you guys screwed up. You have made it so I didn't get the job. You didn't present me right, whatever. Sometimes people blame recruiters. So about a month later, seriously, a month later, here comes another opportunity. And the recruiters called my client and they said, okay, we have another opportunity. It's a better opportunity. It's a manager role. It's a higher level role. It was in the IT arena. That was where he was looking before. And they said, are you interested? And of course he still was. So they went through the process. He interviewed with a bunch of hiring managers and people on the team, different set of people than the first 2 sets. Guess what? He got the job. He got the job. And he wrote back again, thank you notes to everybody. Thank you so much. I'm so excited about the opportunity. You know what happened in the end? The recruiters came back and told my client, they said, you know what? Because you were so gracious in defeat, you didn't come back and chew us out. You were gracious, but you said, keep me in mind if you have future opportunities. And you know what was so cool about that? Those recruiters, after the first go around, they were so impressed with him that they said, this is the kind of person we want on our team. This is the kind of person we need to be, having as a team member is what they called it. So they kept working on his behalf. He didn't know that, but they were working behind the scenes on his behalf, trying to get him in because they wanted him at that company. So he ended up spending about 9 years at that company and then moved away to a different, better opportunity. But it was such a cool story. And I love that because the recruiter said, you didn't give up and you were gracious in defeat. So just remember that, because recruiters, they'll remember those things about you as well. And that could do you better, resolve in the long run. So recruiters have memories like elephants, and remember that, because they forget. If you've treated them nasty, they'll remember that. Okay. So let's jump over now to interviewing in the virtual world. Okay, the same kind of prep we just went through. You're going to do the same kind of preparation, but it's going to be some additional details that I want you to look at as you move into interviewing virtually. So 4 key areas that I want to point out for virtual interviewing. And this has been big in 2020 because most people get to interview on Zoom. I hear it time and again, even from clients I'm working with in career development. They are asked to interview for roles that they might be interviewing with managers in other cities for the corporation. and they're having to interview for internal promotions via Teams or Zoom or WebEx or whatever. Okay. So 4 topical areas you need to practice, over practice getting ready for an interview if it's going to be virtual. How do you operate the video platform? That's a big one because there are different platforms. And if you're not comfortable, you need to get comfortable. And that means practice before the day of the interview. What do you look like on the screen? So there's some tips I'm going to offer for that to help make yourself come across better and a little bit more flattering. You know, it still feels awkward to a lot of folks. It still feels awkward to me, but you have to get used to that. And then prepare for the unexpected. I have a personal story I'll share about this week when I get to that one. Okay. So interviewing in the virtual world, first practice, just find somebody to practice with. And I'm thankful that Mark and Walt offer the services that they do to help people practice getting ready, practice on a video platform too. Find a trusted friend to help you and run through some things. Make sure that you know what platform you're going to be asked to use for a virtual interview. Ask the recruiter in advance, what platform do you use? Is it Zoom? Is it MS Teams? Is it WebEx? Is it something else? There are others out there as well. So don't just assume it's going to be Zoom, even though that seems to be a most popular one, because they do have some discrete differences and you'll not want to look like you're struggling with trying to work through it. Open the program ahead of time and see how you look and just practice, okay? Now let's look at the next topic. How do you operate it? There are many options, so get familiar with what it is you're going to be using. I do recommend you use your laptop or your desktop, not a phone or not an iPad or tablet type device, because the desktop and laptop allow you to easily share things if you have things on your device that you want to share. It also allows for things, you can adjust things a little bit better. I've actually seen people using things like iPads or tablets, and they're moving around and they're doing all kinds of stuff. Well, guess what? If I'm on the other end of that, that's distracting to me as well. So have that still platform so that you can move your head and kind of move around a little bit, but your device is not moving. Test the video and audio up front. I do that every time before I join, even if I'm doing 8 meetings a day, which is what I've been doing the last month. 8 meetings a day with 8 different clients. I always go in and say, test my video and my audio to make sure that, I can hear, they can hear my voice playback before they come on. That's just important because things can go wrong. Do a test run with a trusted friend. That is so important. Ask somebody to help you out. Somebody surely owes you a favor, right? Think about what you look like on screen, and your attention to detail is very important. Think about the angle of the camera looking at you. I mean, people sometimes they're on and they do stuff like this. Well, where's Gayle? Where did she go? Oh, she's at the bottom of the screen. I can see that little ceiling fan at the top of her ceiling, right? Well, that's not what you want the focus to be on. And you also don't want the screen looking up underneath your chin. That's not as flattering as having it looking down at you. One of the things that I do is I actually use a stack of books. So I've actually stacked up about 10 inches tall, a stack of books, and I set my little MacBook Pro on top of it. And so then I can angle it so it's looking down at me instead of up at me. So I can kind of control what's in the background as well. Make sure you've got lighting. I have a lamp sitting in front of me that I turn on at different times of the day. And if it's sunny out, today it's cloudy. But on a sunshiny day, it's like I may only need the lower level of the lamp, but then I may need a brighter light if it's evening or if it's darker. So I do that so that my face shows. Sometimes I've met with people and it's so dark that I can't even see their face, like they're blending into the background, or it's like they're wanting to hide. So make sure that you break through that clutter and make sure they can see you. Okay. Also, fully dress if you're doing a virtual interview. And when I say fully dress, make sure that, like if you've got a blazer that you wear, ladies or guys, whatever, wear that blazer. Put your jewelry on if you wear jewelry, earrings and necklaces. Wear your shoes. It's so funny. People think about that. And I have clients that they shared with me this week. In fact, they're like, oh, I decided to be casual today. And one lady had her hair up in a bun and kind of pulled up like she had just been working out. Now, I wasn't interviewing her. It was a career coaching discussion, but we talked about that. It's like, okay, now make sure that you don't look that way when you're dealing with people at work, because part of how you look and come across is your brand. But, she had on her house slippers. It's like, okay, think about that. It's like if you dress for the interview, like you'd be seeing them in person, you wear your shoes too. And so you feel like you're confident because you know how you're appearing to yourself. And if you were in person, you'd be looking that way too. So it really does make a difference in how you come across. So make sure that you're paying attention to those little details too. Okay, now what do you look like on screen? There's something else besides what you look like. What does your background say about you? And you guys may be looking at my background and saying, that's a pretty boring room. Well, I have pictures of my grandkids on the other 3 walls in my office. I have pictures of things they've drawn and colored that I framed. So, and I've got books on my bookshelves. So if you looked at the other parts of my room, if that was my background, you'd say, oh, what a clutterbug she is. But I use the closet behind me, which is my office closet in my home office. I use that as my solid background. So I don't have things to distract when I'm meeting with personal clients that I'm working with. I don't want to distract based on pictures I have of my grandkids. They don't want to see that stuff. And if you're interviewing with someone, you want them to be focused on you and not be looking, what do they have in the background? You don't want that to distract your attention. So think about those things as well. What does your background noise say about you? My background noise, except for my horrid voice today with my allergies and all, you don't hear my dogs barking in the background. At least you shouldn't, because my husband promised he was going to keep them in their crates until I'm done with this workshop so that you wouldn't hear them barking outside my window like they usually like to do. They'll come up and look in and see me and they'll start barking. And so you want to think about the background noise. Make sure that you don't have things that you can control going on. Don't run your dishwasher or your washing machine or dryer. Don't have those things going while you're in the interview on video. Because if those things start beeping in the background, I know my dishwasher keeps going off until I fix it, open it up and make it quit beeping. So that distracts me, and I don't want to have to get up and do something like that either during an interview. And then, believe it or not, avoiding uninvited guests from attending your interview. That can be both pets or people. We've actually had situations where I've been working with clients, not even in an interview, and somebody in their home, your husband or wife, walks behind them. And it's like, fortunately, they had clothes on. That sometimes, think about that. Those kind of things can happen. And so even though you do your best to say, hey, I'm in an interview, don't bother me. Well, I'm lucky. I have a private home office. I close my door so that my husband knows if that door is closed, I'm working and nobody comes in. The dogs don't come in and so on. But think about those things, because you want to keep uninvited things from happening as well. That's real important. And again, if you don't have a private office and you're sitting in your dining room, for instance, make sure that you look and see, what does your background look like? What kind of an impression are you making? And make sure that you don't have those other interruptions going on as much as possible. Okay. And then one more thing. Please remember that when you're on screen, it does feel strange, because again, I'm talking to my computer camera here. I can see some of you over here on the side, but it's like if I look at you, then I'm not looking at you, right? So I'm trying to focus on that little green dot that's my camera, but it's hard to, because I want to look at the people over here on the side. So think about it though. You don't have to be stiff and you don't have to be like scared. You can still bring your personality with you when you interview on screen. If you can smile, that's great. How do you normally behave in person? I try to pretend that you guys are just on the other side of my desk for me in my office, and I'm just having a conversation. And that works really well when I'm doing one-on-one meetings with clients, because I pretend that they're sitting across from me. Makes it a lot easier. So you can be more conversational about it. But your body language still matters, okay? And we've got one more tip here. This is the one I was going to share about that happened to me this week too. When you go into an interview, a couple of unexpected things might happen that you cannot plan for. First of all, what if you have a power outage? Uh-oh, what happens? If you have a power outage, what happens to your internet connection? Does it also go out? Maybe. Okay, mine does. If my power goes out, my internet doesn't work. Okay, how do you prepare for the unexpected? See, I have my little phone here. Have my little phone. It's a different provider than my internet provider, which is probably a good thing. So Monday morning, I woke up early and turned my computer on because I was getting ready for 8 client meetings back to back all day on Zoom. And at 6 a.m., I'm looking at this going, oh no, my internet is out. My power was on, but my internet wasn't working. Oh, and that happens more often than I would like anymore with the provider I have. They just have challenges. And today was, Monday was one of those days. So what did I do? Oh, I used to have a hotspot on my phone, but I got a new phone recently and a different phone plan. And guess what? I didn't have my hotspot that I normally had. That's one of the things that's important. And if your internet provider is out, do you have a hotspot on your phone that you can use? So I called my phone provider, and within 30 minutes, they had added a hotspot. I had my phone operating. I was up and running 15 minutes before I had my first appointment. But it was because I had my hotspot on my phone to connect to my computer so I could do my Zoom meetings with my clients online. Same thing goes for interviews. So let's pretend that your power goes out and your internet goes out. Well, I always make sure at night before I go to bed that my laptop is fully charged. So if my power's out, I still have a fully charged laptop that'll probably get me through the whole day of meetings. And I make sure my phone's charged up so that when I wake up in the morning, my phone's charged and I have a hotspot. And yes, I about freaked out Monday morning saying, oh my gosh, I used to have a hotspot. Now I don't. I got one now and I'm going to keep one, right? So, but think about things like that. That way you're prepared for the unexpected and you don't have to say, oh, I have to cancel the interview because my power's out, my internet's out, and so on. Okay. So think about that. And as a last resort, make sure again, you've got that direct phone number to the person that you're going to interview with, because even if you try to plan for everything, well, now it may not be a traffic dilemma trying to get to the place in person, but it could be that your power goes out or your internet goes out and you're going, oh, I tried everything and it fail safe didn't work. So you can call them and say, can we do this on the phone or can we reschedule because I have other complications? So we just don't want to make them think that we're silly and stupid, right? We want to make sure that we look all together, even though sometimes we're that duck that's paddling under the water as fast as we can go. So you ace the interview by going through all of the tips and the coaching that Mark and Walt can provide to. You've made the most of the interview. Take your steps to stand out and ace that interview. And I do like to remind people, especially those who are believers in the Lord's word, remember Jeremiah 29:11. That's one of my favorites because it reminds me that the Lord has plans for me to prosper me and not to harm me. And so I like to remember that because he has a plan for my life. And I've seen very clearly when I look in the 2020 rear view mirror, and I can see why I was put in certain situations to land me where I'm at even now. I had to go through my own career transition in 2008 to discover what I really wanted to do and reinvent myself with the help of people like Jeff Morris and Foster Williams, who helped me make decisions that allowed me to see what I wanted to do. And that's why I get to do the things I'm doing today. So just remember those things, just run with it, prepare for things and run with it. Okay. Now it's question time. And this is where Jeff is going to get to take back over and ask questions, and we'll try to answer them as to the best of our possibility here. So,
well, thank you very much, Gayle. Really, there hasn't been nobody has entered any questions on the chat window. So if anybody's got a question, please unmute your mic and ask away. Anyone? Any questions? I think everybody's just too full of turkey. Yesterday on our phone call, we didn't have anybody who wanted to make any comments. I think everybody's got too much turkey at home. Question, just unmute
Bob-
your mic if you
Bob
want to
may
talk.
have a question.
Well, there's one just got posted.
Oh. Gayle, what is your take on virtual backgrounds on laptops?
Okay, I don't have a problem with virtual backgrounds on laptops, but what is distracting is sometimes people will use that virtual background, but then if you move around a little bit, you can see something else there. It looks fake. It just, so I know that there are devices of products you can buy. I've had people tell me this, where there's like a little screen that you can install behind you, like on the chair behind you, that allows that backdrop to look like it's a real office, if you will. Some of them make it look like you're really in an office versus your home. So I think just be careful on what you pick there. The other thing is sometimes I have friends that do this. They'll do like, the Golden Gate Bridge, or they'll do like a beach in Hawaii, and it's a fake backdrop. And to me, for an interview, that's distracting as well. I'd rather see you in an office setting if it's not going to be your home, because everybody knows that we're operating from our home offices now. If they're not inviting you in, they know you're going to probably be at home. You're probably not going to be at a coffee shop even. You're going to be sitting at home somewhere. So just think about what that backdrop looks. Again, how does it present you? Because you're the one that wants to come across. You don't want other distractions working in.
So I guess
Oh.
French fries don't work, or how
Yeah.
about this one, or mixed food? This is
See?
always a favorite of mine. I like this one a lot.
But now, where are you interviewing, Jeff? If you're interviewing at a food company for a role in food, that could be fun, right?
Okay.
But yeah,
Right.
those French fries, I'm like, oh no, that makes me hungry.
Yeah, somebody else parked down here that I use bookshelves. That's a really good one. I know my daughter, it was interesting. Every time she had an interview, she was sitting in our sunroom and there's a painting behind her. And she said 3 different times people would ask about the painting because they thought it was so interesting. So, but that was it. I mean, you couldn't see anything else. It was very plain, very simple. So
Exactly.
very good.
That
All right, somebody else.
That can
sorry.
also be interesting too, because I actually had a client a few months ago, and there was a painting. Every time I met with him, there was this painting hanging behind him in his living room. That's where he was meeting with me. And I asked him, I said, so tell me about that painting. And he said he painted it. He's an artist on the side. He's a tech guy, an engineer guy, but it was like he had painted it himself. And so he told me this story about how he had lived in Germany and had painted this painting that he has in his living room now. So that was kind of a fascinating story too. They probably don't want to see my grandkids' artwork though,
Let's see here. Rebecca asked, any suggestions for women re-entering the workforce, especially without a strong career path before the break?
The biggest word I'm going to use is networking, because if you are coming into the workforce and you've been out for a while and you feel like you have a lot of great skills, because whatever you've done, you probably do have some great skills. You've been a project manager, perhaps at home, raising kids or taking care of family or things like that. But networking is so important. I don't know how Mark and Walt feel about that, but I feel like you've got to make connections. If you've got a company that you want to be at, who do you know there, and how can they help vouch for you and try to get you connected with the right person to give you a shot at an opportunity? What do you guys think on that, Mark or Walt? Is Walt still with us, or did
No,
we?
Walt couldn't. Walt fell away. I know he was.
He
having
fell
issues.
away. His internet
Right.
wasn't working. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, so as a matter of fact, I have someone you can network with there's a recruiting company called Reach Hire, and REACHIRE, I think. I don't think there's 2 H's in there. And so somebody came through the pit crew recently, and they specialize in, one of the things they specialize in is placing people who have recent gaps in their unemployment, right? And their employment. So send me an email at dallaspitcrew@gmail.com, and I'll put you in touch with the young woman who had that happen. She landed at T-Mobile, I believe. She actually went through 2 companies. So a few months ago, like in the spring, through Reach Hire, she had an opportunity. It wasn't a match, but a few months later, they got her into T-Mobile. And that's one option for you. The other one is, people are going to want to know, why do you want to do this, now? And if it's related to what you studied in college or what you, worked earlier in your career, they're going to want to know how you kept current or how you keep current. And really all that, involves is staying in touch with people who are current in the industry. So there you go. You're back to networking.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's see, Raj asked, is it ever okay for a candidate to ask the salary question? I recently had a contract opportunity where they never discussed the pay rate until the end, when they said they wanted to bring me on as a contractor, sent me the contract, but it had a really low offer.
Now, okay, so now what is the
So the
question?
question is it ever okay for the candidate to bring up the salary question first?
You can, absolutely, you can. And especially if you've had the experience where you've gotten a really low offer. If you say, if it's for a contract role, I would say, can you tell me what the rates are? And you can ask that at the initial part of the interview, because if the rates are going to be low enough, you may not want to waste your time talking to them.
Okay.
So can I add a little bit there? Because
Absolutely.
yeah, so this is a question that I just learned the answer to a couple of months ago, and that was from Rex Sowett.
Oh, Rex, yes.
Yeah, so he gave, I loved his presentation on working with recruiters and interviewing, because he gave a very specific recommendation about this question. Okay, so as Gayle mentioned, you need to be prepared to answer the question when they ask you what your salary requirements are. But Rex suggested, and I think it's a good suggestion, is that by the third meaningful interview, right? So if salary hasn't come up, you need to ask. The candidate needs to ask. Don't go any deeper than that without knowing, what the budget is, what they're thinking, if it's a contract, the duration of the contract, and things like that. So feel confident in doing that at the third meaningful interview.
That is great input, Mark. In fact, the thing I always try to remind myself of, because I do get nervous if I have to go into an interview myself, and it's like simply thinking, these are people, we're all having a conversation, and we're trying to figure out, am I going to be the best fit for a role that they have to offer? So I think, even when we use that big scary term networking, sometimes I'll say networking and people they're oh, networking. It's like networking is simply having a conversation, an exchange with someone else, or maybe multiple people. And you're just trying to find common ground, and you're trying to say, how can I help you and how can you help me? It's a give and take. It's a two-way road here. So it's like, let's put the scary stuff out of your mind. It's like an interview is having a conversation to see if you're the right fit. Networking is having a conversation too. Maybe it's not a formal interview, but it's still, you're simply having an exchange of information, trying to see, do we fit? Can we work together? So
good. We've got one more question here. Sandra on Facebook is asking, how important is it to look professional in a virtual interview?
if that is think about how you would go in person. If you would go professionally dressed in person to an interview, wear that same outfit if you're interviewing virtually. It's like, think about the role that you're going for. How do you want to dress? Because you want to appeal to them, to the people you're meeting, whether it's one person or 10 people that are seeing you on a camera. It's like, if you would wear a certain type of suit or a certain outfit in person, do that virtually as well. Excuse me.
Right. Now I know you had a handout. In fact, I'm going to put the handout right now in the chat box so everybody can download it. Let's see here. Let me go find it.
There's actually, there's the deck itself that I went through, and then the virtual interviewing. It's like a 3-page recap of the tips for virtual interviewing as well.
Right. So I
So
just stuck that in the chat box so anybody can go download that. If you want it, for those people on Facebook, you're welcome to email me at webmaster@careerdfw.org, and I will send that to you. Just let me know what you're looking for, and I will get that to you. We tend not to post the decks, and the reason we don't like to do that is because you want to hear the words that Gayle said. So you're welcome. You're going to be able to go back and view this on YouTube or on Facebook, in a couple hours here. So if you have any questions, you can always go back and do that. So Gayle, thank you very much.
You are
Let
welcome.
let me take the screen back over here.
There we
So Gayle, yeah, wonderful presentation. Thank you for being with us today. Some other programming that we have coming up tomorrow at 1 o'clock, we're doing our effective resume class. You're welcome if you want tips and tricks on your resume. You're welcome to join us if you'd like to submit your resume. We usually review 1 or 2 resumes at the end of the session. And if you want, you can take your name and phone number off of it so people can't contact you, because this will be on Facebook and on YouTube in the future. And then this Friday at the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group, Friday morning at 9:30, we're going to have open forum, which is what we do the first Friday of every month. We know you have questions about your job search, and we have the answers. So it'll just sort of be a round table. People can ask questions and talk, and we'll find all about that. Next Tuesday, very interesting presentation. Kurt Vandemotter, who's a recruiter, will be talking about LinkedIn from a recruiter's eye. Every Tuesday at 1 o'clock, we do a LinkedIn presentation. Kurt spends about $20,000 a year paying for the recruiting package on LinkedIn, and he's going to show you what it looks like from the back end and tell you what it takes for you to pop up in his site. So it's a fascinating presentation. Hope you'll join us next Tuesday at 1 o'clock. Next Wednesday, Walt Glass, if his internet's working, will be doing distinctive interviewing. He's got a whole week to figure out how to get his internet up and running. So we'll have Walt next Wednesday at 1 o'clock. And then upcoming the following Friday, the last Friday that we'll be meeting on December 16th, the 10 biggest mistakes that people make while interviewing. And this is with Tony Bashara. Tony owns and runs Babbage and Associates, a recruiting firm here in Dallas. And so interesting presentation. You'll definitely want to join us and hear what he sees, because he's interviewing people on a daily basis, trying to submit the right people to get a job. We will not have any sessions the week of Christmas or New Year's. And then we will start our interview workshop over again with Walt and Mark starting in January. These sessions will be recorded. This one has been recorded. It will be on the Career.fw Facebook page and on the Career USA YouTube channel to view in the future. Give us a couple hours to get those things uploaded, but they will be there. You can go back and watch them, and you can go back and watch any of our prior sessions. So here's what it looks like on YouTube. If you click on playlist, when you go to the Career USA YouTube channel, click on playlist, and then don't click on the video, but actually click down below where you see that red arrow where it says view full playlist. And then what will come up is all the different sessions that we've done with titles. So you'll be able to see Gayle's title will be at the top because it'll be the most current, but then you can scroll down. So if you need help with any of these other subjects, you can scroll down and you can find out what it is we've talked about and get up to date on what we're doing. So just as a reminder, Career.fw is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We have no full or part-time employees. I'm a volunteer. I've never gotten paid to do this over the last 12 years. Gayle's volunteering to speak for us today. We're just here to help you land your next great opportunity. We want you to land a job. We don't want anybody to be on these calls. We want everybody to be employed. That's our goal. So Career.fw, we survive on donations. Please consider when you do land your next opportunity that you will make a donation so we can continue to do what we do to help other people. And if your company happens to offer matching donations, we are registered. Please look us up, allow your donation to double in value. If you don't see us on your list, on your company's list, reach out to me and I will get our name added as I've done in the past. So Gayle, once again, thank you very much. Everybody else have a great rest of the week. Hopefully we'll see you tomorrow or Friday or one day next week. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Jeff. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.